got 7 in the waiting room.
Simon, did you make me co-host as well?
Yeah, you're co-host as well.
Okay, because I couldn't unmute myself before, but now I seem to be able to, so it's fine. Just Kelly, sorry, Courtney, Zoe, and I spoke earlier. Just we can send you an Excel spreadsheet with all the emails, so it's
fantastic. So we'll do a proper email welcome to them.
And it will be just all the attendees, just so you know. We can just get that information. Zoe's confirmed that and proved it, so we'll be able to send you a list of just anyone who attended today.
Fantastic.
Even though we all know loads of people sign up.
I mean, we can decide if we want to send it to everyone. We can. I leave that up to you. I just thought maybe it would be an incentive for people to show up.
Yeah, no, 100%. And we have really, we've had nearly 160 people sign up, or just actually it is 160. So that's quite good. Although, as we know, they don't always on the day.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Good luck.
Hi.
I hope it all goes really well. Very much looking forward to this. I think we got such a great mix of speakers. It's fantastic. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, darling. Nice to see you.
Nice seeing you, Laura.
Just to let all the speakers know, I will open it. I will do a very top line introduction to each of you, and then I'll hand over for you to do a bit more of an introduction. And I know we kind of spoke about it when we caught up. I've switched the order so that we do raising finance first, and then store closures, and then sustainability, just to try and make sure that we're not spending too much time on sustainability, because it is such a rabbit warren. But we'll be guided by the questions as well. Any other questions from any of the speakers?
Not for me, no.
No. Not too good at doing intros on myself, to be honest, but we'll see what happens.
I'm good as well, thank you.
You can always just, Dan, you can always just read what you sent us, if you really want. If you don't want to think outside the box, I'm sure.
Someone else wrote that. I can't remember what it said now.
Right, guys, we've got 21 people in the waiting room, and we've got 2 minutes to go. So I'll let people in. Give it another minute or so.
Yeah, I think we should try and leave it as long as possible. But we don't really just want to be sat here in silence.
All right, I'll do it bang on 2 o'clock. As soon as it's 2 o'clock, I'll let them in. 22 people in the room.
And then when are you telling me when to start? Or are we just...
Up to you, really, whenever you're ready. We'll just,
do we want to agree on numbers, or is it as soon as you've opened it?
We did press events, we left it a couple of extra minutes.
Maybe give it another couple of minutes.
And then we started once we opened it, because otherwise it's really awkward. And you're just going, so we just
I would rather wait until to let them in than be in silence.
I'll keep you up to date with how many people are in there. We've got 21 at the moment, so
30. Oh, no, yeah, that's including us, yeah.
Yeah. Right, it's 2 o'clock and we've got 23 in the waiting room.
Suspense.
I know this the bit where you silent.
We've got 30 in the waiting room now. So shall I let them in and then got 30, it's going up all the time. So shall I let them in and then we can maybe say you're going to wait a couple of minutes until more people come in.
Okay.
I think it's 2 o'clock, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll let them all in.
2:01, so I think
Yeah,
so.
let everyone in.
Hi everyone. We're just waiting for a few more people to join and then we'll start shortly. Hello everybody. I'm absolutely delighted that you've joined us today to discuss 3 biggest challenges in beauty. I'm Fiona Glen, Head of Projects at the RedTree. For those of you who don't know, the RedTree is a leading international beauty consultancy company established for over 11 years. We've been running webinars regularly on a wide range of topics, kick-started by the pandemic. We often speak to our clients about using their community to guide their focus. And this is the first webinar of its kind where we've done exactly that. So we completed a poll on LinkedIn to establish the biggest challenges in the beauty industry. The results of that were fundraising, store closures, and sustainability. So those are going to guide the discussion today. And there will be the opportunity to ask questions, both using the raise hand function and also using the chat. I am delighted to be joined by an amazing panel of beauty industry experts. So on the panel today, we have Kelly Kovac, who joins us from New York. Kelly is the founder of Beauty Matter, which is a highly informative beauty publication. And Kelly has a background in consultancy and is a real forward thinker. Dan Williams is Managing Director of Orion, which is a leading developer and manufacturer of beauty products in the UK. Dan also runs a podcast, Pocket Mentors, which I highly recommend if you haven't already. And then finally, Laura Rideau is the founder and CEO of Evolve Beauty, which is a highly successful brand, which she'll tell you more about for sure. Real cross-section and different perspectives from the panelists. So yeah, I'll hand over to Kelly to introduce herself in a bit more detail and then we'll get into some of the topics.
Thank you, Fiona. So
Yeah, well, thank you for having me today. I love the way that you've sort of framed this webinar and asked people what their perspectives were. So looking to diving into the challenges. But Beauty Matter, I kind of feel like I have two personalities in the beauty industry. The first 20 years of my career was spent on the brand side, building brands, advising brands. I'm a founder and operator. So that's been my sort of beauty reality for 20 some odd years. I had no intention of building a media platform, yet here we are. It was an idea that I couldn't shake, that evolved from a newsletter, an idea into a proper platform. We started building a business on top of it about 2 years ago, right as we headed into the pandemic. I think what differentiates us is we focus on beauty and wellness. It's where I've spent my career. And our perspective is a little different because we've had skin in the game, we've operated businesses. And we also have journalists that report on the news as well. But we're happy to share the insights we have today.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, really excited to have you on the panel. Dan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the industry about 20 years. I have to say the beauty industry wasn't something I thought I'd ever get into, at least like I didn't expect to stay in it for 20 years, but it's an industry I absolutely love. I've never been really involved in the branding side. As a contract manufacturer now at Oriam Personal Care, we've made a strategic decision never to have our own brands. We want to absolutely focus on serving brands and serving customers. We've set up our business so we can accommodate startups. We've recently reduced our minimum order quantities down to 2,500 units, which we think will give people a real good platform and step into the marketplace. And we can also scale up. We really put the customers at the forefront of everything we do, and that's why 4.5, 5 years ago now we set up a US operation out there to help UK brands really get a footstep into the US market as well and open up those opportunities. So we can do, as I say, the small minimum order quantities up to the big scales of 500,000 million units at any one time. That really helps beauty boxes and things like that as well to help getting exposure out into these new markets. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to having a chat with Kelly and Laura today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dan. Last but by no means least, over to Laura to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Rudo. I'm the founder and CEO of Good Ventures, which is a development company. I've been in the beauty industry for about 15 years, and I set up my development company about 12 years ago, really with a vision to try and make sustainable and organic beauty more accessible to a wider audience and to create products that make a difference. I completely own my business, and so I'm interested in talking about funding and different options on funding, and I have a really strong perspective on sustainability, so I'm really looking forward to talking about that because we do lots in that area with Good Ventures. So really looking forward to talking to you about Evolve Beauty, our major brand, and having a really good chat today.
Fantastic, thank you. So without further ado, we're just going to go into a few questions to get going. Like we said, do send in questions on the chat or the raise function if there's anything particularly pressing. We're going to start with talking about raising finance. And yeah, Laura's already mentioned it, but I'm going to go to Dan first. And just kind of from your perspective as a manufacturer, where do you see brands either successing or failing in terms of raising funds?
Yeah, that's a super good question. When we get approached by brands at the very early stages, it really varies from people who have literally just had a bit of an epiphany overnight over a glass of wine, or it might have been people that have been building up a business case for some time, and they're really ready to start talking and start developing the products. Where some challenges start coming in is initially they don't need a lot of funding to get going. We don't as a business charge for any of the product development because we're just conscious that it's people's livelihoods and we want to help them really get started straight away. So it's not about having a load of cash available. There's a real good way of doing it. I think the first thing that brands need to be aware of is putting together that cash flow forecast to understand all the areas that they need to be mindful of, and probably talking to a load of other people in the industry and manufacturers to see what they haven't taken account of, because there's so many times that people underestimate the cost that it's going to take to actually get a product from its infancy to launch. I then go jumping one step further. Getting the products launched doesn't tend to be that much of an issue. The biggest challenge comes when they've been more successful than they realise, or as successful as they envisaged, and then didn't realise that at that point they need to invest a lot more in more stock, and that becomes a real big challenge. And it's how they're going to fund that, because a lot of the time they've invested a lot of the money that's been coming in on the marketing side of the business, and then it leaves this really big hole, and it creates some challenges with manufacturers, maybe with packaging suppliers. And I think that's something that everyone really needs to be mindful of from the get-go, really. It's quite interesting to hear about what Laura's been doing as well, though, from funding it herself, because a lot of people, they get these opportunities and everyone gets a little bit carried away, and the patient goes a little bit, and rather than being self-funded and creating this like virtuous circle of cash flow coming in, they start seeking investment really quickly because they don't want to potentially miss out on an opportunity. So I think that's one of the probably more challenging points, because again, I never wanted to work with brands. I don't know what I would do in that situation, to be honest. I'd like to think I wouldn't, and I could be patient, but when you've got big opportunities and you've been working on a brand for such a long time, I think it's quite difficult to ignore those opportunities that come your way.
Yeah, and I guess the whole point of today as well is looking at it from different perspectives. And as a manufacturer, you also want to be investing in people that you truly believe in, and they're going to keep your factory and lines full as well.
No, exactly. Well, that's why we've lowered our minimum order quantities down to the 2,500 level to help the startups, so they're not having to part with as much cash at the beginning and have stock just sat around there, because we're absolutely mindful of this working capital being a priority.
But at the same time, you can't just run the business in the factory on small lines the whole time as well.
No, that's why we're very selective about who we work with, and it's the ones that have done the prep in the background. So when they're actually talking through their business plans, that we know we're backing the right ones, really, the ones that know what they're doing, or the ones that have really got a clear vision. Yeah, very interesting. Right, Laura, I'm going to go over to you, and it'd be really great. I'm sure lots of people on the webinar would like to hear about how you've grown the business from it being self-funded.
Yeah, so interesting. So I started off working with another contract manufacturer, not with Dan, but with another family-run manufacturer in the UK who were great, a really good partner of ours. And they had small minimums as well, which was helpful. Although what I found was that when, at the scale I was at the very beginning of setting up my business, that was still quite a lot of stock. One of the things it meant was that it was very hard to make very, rapid changes, or if we needed to learn something about a product, if something wasn't working, it was hard to make things different, because our innovation cycle was very quick at the front end. We could get new products to market really quickly, but then if we needed to change something, we would then have 1,000, 2,500 products that we needed to then sell through before we could then change a formula. And one of the advantages of the model that we now use, which is that we make products in-house, is that we actually do much smaller batches than that. So we do sort of batches in the hundreds rather than in the thousands, and that enables us to be quite innovative in terms of the type of products that we launch. We can take a few more risks, and we're not sure always if something's going to work, which is, it's sometimes on the sustainability front. We're working on things like solids and concentrates and all these sorts of unusual products. It's quite helpful to be able to be sort of quite lean in terms of that cycle, so that we can learn and see what people like, and then we can change things. And it also just enabled us, when we moved to bringing everything in-house, to be able to, just with the same amount of investment, be able to launch 20 products rather than just 5. So, we did a few hundred of lots of products. And that's why we moved to the packaging design we have now, with the labels, which are very simply printed, because we were doing all of that in-house. So for us, it's worked really well. But I think, there are many different, several different routes you can take to this. So mine is a very much longer burn, slower burn approach. And I'm sure after I finish, Kelly can talk about the amazing brands who raise money and then they go really big and they go into a big store. But my model doesn't really work that way. It's very sort of sustainable and slow and steady. So I've grown my business out of cash flow. I took some loans early on, but actually now we grow out of the money that we make, we reinvest it in working capital. And I totally agree with Dan that working capital is so important. And there's so many good businesses that fail because they run out of money when they're trying to expand. Actually, often they're doing really well, but they just haven't sort of managed their cash flow well. And I'd add another point I think is really important if you're thinking about going into this industry is to make sure you allow yourself enough margin. Because one of the things I learned early on was that if you want to work with distributors, you need to make sure that you've really thought about your pricing and your margins. Because if you haven't given yourself enough margin, you then don't have the money to reinvest in the business to kind of grow it organically. So so my approach has been slow and steady, which is sustainable. So there are some types of really big stores I wouldn't approach yet, because although I'd love to be in them, it'd be amazing to be in one of these great big stores, the investment to get in them would be so big that right now it wouldn't be sustainable for me. But I think that, in the future it would be. And then when I get to that point, the word of mouth and everything about our brand will be commensurate with the distribution that we've got, because it's one thing to get into the big stores, but really it's about selling out. So how do we actually make sure the end customers know about the products? Getting in is just the very first step. And early on we got into a big chain, and then I had the stock and I had the working capital, but I didn't have a team to go around and help me make sure that people knew about my product. And so that's the other side of it as well, making sure you've got all the right people in place to be able to support the brand, and you've got the brand awareness in the markets you're going into.
Yeah. Great. Over to Kelly.
Yeah, so I think both Laura and Dan have talked about some really crucial elements that often get overlooked. And that's sort of when you start growing, that inflection point of having the capital on hand to build the inventory to support the growth. A lot of people focus on launch. They focus on opening the doors, and then when you get momentum, they sort of run out of the runway when they really sort of get going, and people think they're much larger than they are, and you want to be able to fuel that. But just stepping back a minute, I think funding and valuations have become, I think, in definitely the past 5 years, maybe the past 10 years, this marker of success in some way. 20 years ago, businesses were self-funded very much in the way that we were talking about now. But in the past 5 years, definitely, the ecosystem has changed. And so and listen, we're complicit in this. We cover deal flow all the time. You have vendors obsessed with raising these very large rounds of funding with large evaluations. And sometimes you don't get the whole story. So yeah, you might have $1 billion valuation. You may own a very small part of your business, and you may or may not be profitable. So I think before you even go down that path of deciding how you're going to capitalize the business, is understand what kind of business do you want to run? Do you have sort of a long-term view? Do you have a short-term view where you're building something to exit? Which that's a whole other topic, because that's much harder to achieve than it looks like. But there is nothing wrong with running a small, profitable business that gives you a very nice living. I think those never get talked about, but that is also a marker of success. As is, all of these big fundraisers. But I think, as a founder, an entrepreneur, you need to decide which path you want to take. Because once you start taking money, especially venture capital money, there is kind of no going back. You've just bought rocket fuel. So you better be prepared to move fast. And you'll be constantly chasing growth until there's sort of a liquidity event. Or you self-fund it with loans, with friends and family, with angel, and you have organic growth. And both of them are very valid paths. but they're very different paths.
Yeah, that VC one is an interesting one now, especially on the back of COVID with the pandemic, and everyone's seen it as almost like a recession-proof type industry. It's been an industry that's been going okay. So there's a lot more like VCs out there that are willing to put money in at the moment, which is quite exciting if you're a brand. But I think a big thing with the brands right now is everyone is driven, like getting driven by purpose, and they've got this real clear identity in the early stages. And what we're beginning to see is a lot of people start making compromises on what their core values were at the time because they've got this VC investment. And exactly what Kelly said, they're like, well, you've got to achieve this now. We've got to do this. We've got to do this. You've got to hit the numbers. And suddenly you're having to then make compromises against what you were setting out to do in the first place. And I think, that, and again, like what Kelly was saying, like that's great. And you might be happy with that. But if that really isn't the journey you want to go or the path you want to go down, then you just absolutely really need to consider it, because there are a lot of people out there now, which is good and bad.
Yeah, I mean, and I also think you need to take the time to get to know the investors that you're taking money with, because it is, I mean, people often say like it's like a marriage, and it is. These are people that you are attached to contractually. They're not going anywhere. One of the things that I suggest is that there are a lot of founders, successful founders that have successfully built and exited businesses that are making angel investments. And I think it's fantastic to have a founder on your cap table because their perspective is invaluable.
Yeah.
I think the other important thing is when to take money, because I think that it's important that you've got your product market fit really strong. I think, well, we decided at the time when we decided we weren't going to look for money, it was partly because there weren't as many purpose-driven investors around as they are now. I think actually now there are more around who do understand that mission-driven businesses can be really successful, which is fantastic. Wasn't really the case sort of 12 years ago, and I was worried about how we would be aligned on a liquidity event when I wasn't planning to sell my business anytime soon. But the other reason that I didn't take money early was because actually the product market fit took a while for me to get right, to get the right audience, the right packaging. And for about the first 5-6 years, I was in learning mode. And if I'd taken money at that point, I think I probably wouldn't still have my business now, because investors would have meant that I was either growing the business or, the business wouldn't have worked. And I think, if I'd taken money early, I'd just have made bigger mistakes. And mistakes are normal and you learn from them and it's okay to make them. But if you have a team of investors who have high expectations, then sometimes it's not the right time to make them.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, there's so many different options. Accelerators are also very key. For any of you who don't know, we're actually running the UK Beauty Accelerator at the moment. And yeah, there's lots of similar programs that do offer that difference between VC and the big funding, which many of which you do need to have self-funded in order to get it to a point where they're actually interested as well. Yeah,
I think one of the challenges when Kelly was saying get to know them, I think that's critical. I think the big challenge, because like they're not going anywhere, Kelly, are they? Like they're going to be around for a while. But I think
they've got their finger on the scale and it's not going away.
Yeah, no, exactly. But the problem is when you've got that opportunity and you need investment, I suppose as a brand owner, you could be worried that if you don't go with those guys now, they're going to go and find another brand. And then you've missed out on that opportunity. So it's kind of having confidence in what you're doing, knowing if you're doing a good job, there's going to be someone else that wants to come around and invest in you. And you may have lost that opportunity, but you may look back and think, oh, that's good. These guys came around and they really believed in what I was doing and what the brand's about. So I think I would 100% go with that, get to know them. And if you've missed out on that one because you're doing due diligence or you're trying to understand who they are, then just be content with that, I think would be.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would say is even if you're not raising money and you get sort of inbound interest, always take the conversation because you never know. And, finding an investment partner is like any other partner. It's built on a relationship and relationships take time to build. And, you know, sometimes you'll get an inbound call or you'll run into someone and there's not a fit because of scale or whatever reason, but stay in touch with them. You know, this is what they do. They have their eye on brands. They watch brands grow. They watch founders. And, you know, you know, I think there is a little bit of, I don't know if it's a misnomer, but it has never been easier to launch a beauty brand. The barrier to entry is pretty low. You know, there's manufacturers like Dan that work on sort of more entry level minimum order quantities. You can throw up a website really easily, social media. But the fact of the matter is these brands, beauty brands, are complicated. There are a lot of moving parts. It takes a long time to build a brand. You can look at Paula's Choice. Yeah, they just had a massive exit. It's a 25-year-old brand. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think that's something that gets forgotten. We see these billion-dollar exits of brands that are 10, 15, 20 years old. So, you know, you really have to kind of dig in and have a long-term view, because sort of those short-term exits are really kind of few and far between.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is that point that there's no right answer. It's about being true to your brand and sticking to your guns. Really good conversation on that. I think we probably could have spent the whole hour on that, but I'm going to move it on and go on to talking about store closures and the role of physical beauty. So I'm going to start with you, Laura, as a brand owner. How have store closures and the changes in retail, how have they affected your strategy?
So what we've found is that a lot of our physical retail partners switched a lot of their business online during the pandemic and innovated their business model. And we did something similar. So we were innovating in ways of trying to bring, you know, those physical interactions online. And of course, it's very difficult to do that because you can't replicate the physical interaction in all ways. But we did things like we introduced online consultations and things like webinars where we were doing sort of Zooms, how to do a facial, all these things at home, and, you know, your home kit to go with that sort of thing. And that, I think, was really engaging for customers. And during lockdown, I think customer behavior also changed a lot. So they had more time and they were spending longer on self-care and doing sort of routines and things at home. What's really interesting now is that things have really unwound the other way. So what I see now is that people are very focused on trying to make up for all the lost time, to see all the friends that they didn't see. And I'm sure that they're investing in, you know, their wardrobes and in makeup and things like that. And, you know, we see that in terms of the mix, that, you know, the shift in mix back to sort of what it was like before. But actually some things have remained. So some of those online consultations and things are things that we're still doing, because actually we found it a really good way to interact with customers directly, and really give that, you know, the advice from us as well as via our partner brands. So that's our perspective.
I think that talking to the community bit's really important now, isn't it? I think it's given them loads of opportunities for that. I know the brands that we work with, when it first kicked in, the pandemic, there was like this real lull and everyone was a bit unsure. Then everyone started finding their feet super quickly. I suppose like the buzzword was pivot, wasn't it, at the time? And suddenly they just found the ability to talk to their community, which is always there, but they were just happy with these like retail stores and stuff like that. Suddenly they were learning what the customers wanted. They were talking to them a bit more. They were just creating this community, like a real built-in community, and people loving the brands and stuff like that. So I think I absolutely agree. I think it's been great, and doing the videos like you were saying, you can start educating your consumers on how to use the products. I think that was fantastic.
Yeah. And Kelly, any particular recent insights from the US over what you're seeing with stores and physical?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, the store closures, I think, made everyone reassess their business. You had to scramble and you needed to figure it out. But one of the things one of the most interesting things, most exciting things that I think came out of it was the fact that the beauty advisor became the conduit between physical and digital. And, you know, kind of leading into the pandemic, there were a lot of these platforms that existed to facilitate that. But I feel that we were leveraging kind of gimmicky tech to almost minimize their role in the equation. And listen, at the end of the day, that beauty advisor in that retail store is the face of your brand for that consumer in that moment. They are the most crucial part of the equation. And I think we lost sight of that when technology came into the equation. And I think that sort of this kind of embracing the importance of people, specifically the beauty advisors or even your retail team, if you face them to be more digital facing during the pandemic, and giving them the digital tools to clientele with consumers online or in store is really powerful. And I think, you know, we've been giving lip service to this idea of omni-channel, but very few brands actually execute an omni-channel strategy. And I think that coming out of the pandemic and this necessity, the retail was closed, physical retail was closed, it wasn't an option. And we had to think differently. And, you know, and people did, they rose to the occasion. So I think that is really exciting. I also think that, you know, in the US, we have some really interesting changes happening with, you know, the relationship with Ulta and Ulta, I need to get it right, Ulta and Target and Kohl's and Sephora. You know, I think what we've seen in the past 6 to 8 months is this consolidation of retail. It's happened in the UK as well. And I'm kind of interested to see what happens on the retail landscape, because you have Feel Unique and Cult Beauty, both acquired. You have strategic partnerships, you know, with kind of apparel online retailers that have gotten into the beauty game. So there's a lot of consolidation and strategic partnerships that have happened. Not sure where that leaves small independent brands in terms of outlets to sell. But the landscape has certainly shifted. And, you know, I guess Q4 will kind of tell us how it all kind of pans out.
I think it's, like you said, it has accelerated the changes that were happening, but it's exaggerated the difference in those that were already thinking in a way of omnichannel versus those that were just like really not relying on online sales at all. And I think those are the ones that have really struggled to catch up.
It's another interesting angle on this, which is cost to service physical retail and be able to train physical retail, because if there's less footfall in the physical stores, it becomes less cost effective to send in an advisor to be a demonstrator and a trainer. And actually in the pandemic, we weren't allowed to go into a lot of stores for quite a long time. And they shifted towards allowing us to do virtual training, which for us is actually we really like that, because we can, you know, do a Zoom and we can really give a fantastic training experience rather than trying to do it in between customer consultations on the shop floor, which is always really difficult for everybody. Some stores are much more forward thinking on that than others in our partner retail group. But, you know, it's really interesting to see how that now plays out. Is there going to be, you know, is the footfall going to then get back to where it was to enable us to go back into stores and be profitable with our demonstrators? Or are we going to find that actually, you know, we're going to be trying to work more virtually with our partner stores and not be able to, you know, commercially support that network of brand ambassadors? That I'm not sure. I think you're right. Q4 will tell what the footfall does.
Yeah, and perhaps it will be a bit of a blend as well.
Kelly, do you think there'll be historically, I think a lot of the retailers have had more of the power when it comes to negotiating with the brands on, you know, payment terms and listing and store count and stuff like that. Are they, because of what's happening in the world of e-commerce and things like that now, and shops on Facebook and Instagram, do you think the brands will have a bit more power when it comes to negotiating, because they'll the retailers will be after them, or do you think the retailers will always have the pick of the bunch?
I think it depends on how badly they want your brand.
Yeah, okay.
You know, I think that it all comes down to building up demand. And if you have sort of the hot new brand, obviously you have more negotiating power. So I really think that's why it's important when pitching retailers to prove that there's demand and you're going to get sell through. But I mean, I'm not sure that dynamic of, who has the power in negotiating has changed. I think it's always been the same.
Yeah, I think actually leading on to the next topic, one of the things we're seeing is retailers are having more power when it comes to even defining things like what sustainability is. So within sustainability, one of the most common practices is the Sephora clean principles, because they have actually defined what that means. So, and I can see it going that way even more, that retailers are choosing brands based on whether they are Leaping Bunny or not, and so on. So I think, yeah, there's a movement going that way. Laura, if we're moving on to the sustainability side of things, it'd be really good to hear from your side on what you've done at Evolve and kind of, to be as sustainable as possible, whatever that means.
Yes, so it was a real core mission of mine to create a business where the goodness was built into the actual product, which meant there'd be no conflict between us just selling as many as we could, and then that would mean that we would do more good. So that was really a core principle of mine, and so over the years I've tried to go further and further towards that goal. So initially we launched with recycled packaging, this was back in 2009, and a certified organic range of products, and then more recently we've taken that further. So we now make in our eco studio, which is wind powered, and we also use lots of energy efficiency in the studio. And because we make in small batches, there's actually a waste element to it as well, because we never waste a batch. And when batches come back, we have an outlet store. So we even if there's a short shelf life batch, we'll always sell that through to end customers at a discounted price. We have sourced the most waste-free packaging that we can. So we use a lot of glass, recycled plastic. We use recycled plastic lids. There are still some areas where we can't be perfect on that. So things like pumps, which are very hard to recycle, which cannot be found recycled because they're very sort of precision components. We have a refill scheme where you can have a bottle with an aluminium cap that can be recycled, and you can put that into your existing pump. And we're trying to take it further at the moment, looking at, as I said, things like concentrates and solids and things like that for the future. We actually went plastic negative last year, which means that we work with a company called Repurpose Global, and we fund projects that take twice as much plastic out of the environment every year as we buy. And that we launched that as part of our sustainability report. So every year we do a sustainability report. We did the first one last January, and we're going to do one again this January with all of the progress we've made. So we're very transparent about where we're up to with our sustainability, and waste is one of the pillars, along with carbon. So on carbon, we have mapped about 75% of our carbon footprint. We're now trying to map the ingredients, which is really hard because we have 180. We're trying to work out, how they all get to us, and how do they, and what method of transport. So we're working on that at the moment. So our goal is to become completely zero carbon. Hopefully we'll be able to get there by the end of this year if we're able to map all of our carbon and then offset it. And then we've been working on things like taking unsustainable palm oil out of our products. We're nearly there on that. We've only got two ingredients left to go. We're hoping to do that at some point next year. And of course, the whole sort of organic certification is a really big thing for us too. And that has a big sustainability element to it, because it's all about soil health as well as people's health, which is very important to us. And I think having the certification is really important. What else have we done? We started using grass paper cartons rather than craft paper, because they reduced waste and and carbon as well. I think that's most of them. I hope I haven't missed any big ones. But yes, basically the idea is to get to the point where we are as low impact on the planet as possible, and we actually start with helping things to regenerate. That's our kind of mission at the end of the day. And I think that, you know, one of the other really big things I'm really interested in is how we can make our supply chain more ethical. So sustainability, I think, is quite broad. There's sort of eco-friendly, but then there's all kind of ethical as well. And I think at the moment, the supply chain in beauty is a bit of a black box, and we don't really understand enough about our ingredients for my liking. And that's not just something that's true for us, it's true for the whole industry. So we're trying, you know, to set up a project to get that certified as well. But that's a really big project that would take a while, I think, to put in place.
Yeah, definitely. And Dan, from what you're seeing of what your customers are demanding, through to even maybe your suppliers as well, how are things changing that way from sustainability perspective?
It really varies from brand to brand. That's why we've had to be really key. We've been speaking to a lot of the brands to understand what sustainability means to them. The big one Laura missed off, but she alluded to it at the first topic, was you need your business to be sustainable, number one, that you're going to be around. Like, it's great that you can do all these initiatives, but if you've got your business model all wrong and you're not going to be around in 6 months, it's kind of like a bit of a waste of time. But so number one's that. But yeah, so we've been chatting to a lot of the brands to really understand what it means to them. It's and people have such different takes. Like, for us, reducing our carbon footprint's a massive one. So we're trying to source materials as locally as possible and just try and reduce down the carbon footprint like that. What we're doing as a business, we put solar panels on the roof of our factory, and again, we're hoping to be carbon neutral by offsetting again by the end of November. Similarly to what Laura's doing, and this is key when it goes down, clearly Laura's doing the products herself, but if you're another brand, you work with a contract manufacturer, what everyone's doing at the moment is the same thing. They want to see what's going on down their supply chain. So we're getting a lot of questionnaires from the brands that we work with that are wanting to answer exactly the same questions that Laura's asking. And I've completely lost my train of thought now. Yeah, so that's all right. We're doing exactly the same. So B Corp is one of those big bodies at the moment. So it's getting a lot of attention. We're working towards that. A part of that, you want to understand what's going on in your supply chain as well. So yeah, people are going down that. But I think it's just this big circular piece. Some people are going down refills, and then they're using pouches that can't be recycled. And in some instances, the pouches are coming from the Far East, so it's a huge carbon footprint. But their big thing is they don't want things to, or they want to be able to reuse and refill these other products, and that's their main focus. That's one of them. Other people are really wanting to go down this PCR route, so using recycled plastics in their products, and then by definition, some of the packaging that's been created isn't always recyclable on the back of it. So it really is a minefield. So I think as a brand, having a real clear understanding. So when you're talking to your community, and you can talk about what sustainability means to you. That I think is massive. Otherwise, you're going to be trying to do a bit of everything to appease everyone. It's just not going to work. Yeah. And then what we can then do as a manufacturer is understand what it actually means to you, and we can make sure that if we're sourcing raw materials and we're doing the product development for you, we'll keep it local. If that's not so important, but you want to really reduce down your number of ingredients, we can do that. So that's coming back to the clean beauty thing about people reducing number of ingredients in their products. I know we kicked that around in the previous chat actually, but I think that's key. People want transparency. I think that's a big one that's happening at the moment as well.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It's a minefield, and it is definitely about defining it. Kelly, I'm sure you've got lots to add to that. There was a really good article on Beauty Matter this week about recycling and things. But yeah, give us your thoughts on it.
You know, I think it's one of those large topics that's complicated. And I think, you know, the continuing attempt at simplifying sustainability isn't going to get us anywhere. And it kind of leads, you know, I think first and foremost, I think as global citizens, everyone needs to be focused on sustainability. It's the right thing to do. That being said, sustainability is a path, not a destination, and everyone's path is different. And I think we need to respect that, because, you know, we have a lot of conversations with people in our webinars. We kind of love when people debate. But, you know, I think with sustainability, there is kind of this virtue signaling and finger pointing. And, you know, listen, it is much easier to launch a sustainable business from the ground up. Very, very difficult to retrofit a legacy brand to sustainability. It's a process. And, you know, so I think for anyone, and Dan touched on this, I think you know, people throw terms around, but I think what you really need to do is put a framework together of what sustainability means to you. What are your goals and objectives? How are you not only going to achieve them, but how are you going to measure them? Because technologies, materials are constantly evolving. So it's not kind of, you know, before we would pick our packaging, right? That was our packaging, and then we moved on. We very rarely evaluated it kind of beyond that, unless we were doing a brand refresh. Now you're constantly looking, how can I make my packaging more sustainable? It is constantly evolving. So you need to have a plan, and you need to have goals and measurements in place. And there are a lot of third parties that will give you kind of validation. B Corp certification, I think, is going to be a much bigger standard. One of the reasons I love it, it's, first of all, it's very complicated. You cannot just write a check, give a little bit of documentation and get a seal to use. It's about 100 questions, and it's constant. It's every 3 years evaluated again. So, and it also gives you a framework. The UN has a great framework, but, like, you know, really figure out what sustainability work means to you. What is your framework? What are your goals and objectives, and how you measure them? Because transparency is going to become increasingly important, and people are going to be like, yeah, that's great that you made X claim, but show me the proof that you're actually doing it. And, you know, I think that another big piece of sustainability, I think it's amazing seeing really large brands collaborating on solutions. So, you know, Colgate and the toothpaste tube, they made a more sustainable tube, and then they open sourced it. Anyone can buy this tube. So that kind of collaboration, I think, is really amazing.
I agree. And I think even if the bigger brands take a long time to get there, the impact they can have is enormous. And so, you know, as a much smaller brand, if we can show what's possible or inspire or, you know, get customers interested in it in any way, then it might help move the whole industry, not just my business, but lots of small businesses like mine. And the other impact I think we can have is to encourage suppliers to create more sustainable options. So way back when I first started being in beauty, we were asking, you know, can you make that without parabens, please? And the supplier said, well, we don't have that option. You know, 5 years on, they did. And actually, I think on packaging, it's the same. You know, right now, there's some of the things, they were not good solutions. For example, to sachets, I really want biodegradable sachets. I really wish they existed, and they don't exist yet. But I'm sure that they're going to come on stream because there's so much more demand coming through. And we kind of act as the intermediaries, really, between customers saying, well, why don't you have this now? And the suppliers saying, well, you know, I didn't know anyone needed that. And then we can really help to kind of change that supply chain. But it does take a while for it to come through sometimes.
I think there's also infrastructure issues, right? So, you know, we talk about recycling, and people make claims about their products are recyclable. And at the end of the day, very little actually gets recycled. At least I'm speaking in the US. I think it's a bit better in Europe. And even some of these packaging innovations like monomaterial pumps, they may be recyclable, but the fact of the matter is when they're going down that conveyor belt in a recycling facility, it looks like the old pump. So guess what? It's not going to get recycled. It doesn't matter that it can be recycled. So, when we talk about supply chain, I think transparency is one thing, but I also think that true sustainability also requires us rethinking the traditional beauty supply chain, especially when it comes to refills, to some of these packaging innovations that are recyclable. And, the only way that we're going to be able to recycle more plastic or glass or anything else is to create a market for the product. If there's not a market for the material, it's going to go into a landfill.
That's why the circular economy bit is really interesting, where people are like, the reuse thing is so much more important. So we're working with a lot of brands at the moment that are going down the route where it goes out to the consumer, they can return it via free post, they can take it to another depot, or they can send it back, it gets washed, it gets cleaned. And these are the aluminium and glass. They will come back, get cleaned fully, then they get repurposed and pushed back out there, and people are using them again. I think that piece is probably as good as you're going to get right now, based on what you were just talking about, Kelly.
It is, but I think, has anyone really done an LCA, a life cycle analysis, on how much moving it around really costs? That's why I think that, the end solution,
it's the carbon footprint again. This is it.
Well, how do you compare waste and carbon footprint? You can't, then they're not apples and apples. But that's why I said concentrates, because that leapfrogs that whole thing. So you send them a pill or some powder or something, and then you just put it in a bottle and top it up with water. I think that's the dream solution.
Yes, so you're reusing your products where it live where it's at. That's why we've been working on the tablets. We've been working on powder, things like that that go in. You shake it up.
Exactly, but it's much harder to do that. So that would take a while. But I think that's the future.
Well, that's it, isn't it? We've done it. Solved it.
There we go, it's solved. Who knew we were going to solve sustainability on this webinar? Yeah, really interesting conversation. It's definitely a minefield. I will see if we have any questions as we're nearing the end. We've got some amazing speakers, so if anybody does have any questions to the panelists, please can you use the raise hand feature, or if you'd rather put it in the chat. Or maybe we've solved everything now.
Well, I think it's just important to continue having these conversations, because everyone has learnings to share. And I think it's sort of having conversations and entering them with sort of a generosity of sharing that information is really sort of what's going to move everything forward, from financing to retail to sustainability. I, having been in the beauty industry for a couple decades, one of the reasons I love it is because by and large, it's a very collaborative industry. You can always find someone who will talk to you and answer your questions.
Yeah, the networks are incredible.
Yeah, it's a small world, but no, yeah. Thank you, panelists, so much for that chat
Thanks
today.
for having us.
Yeah, really, really insightful across each of the areas that we covered. Kelly's done some closing remarks. Any closing remarks from you, Dan?
You put me on the spot. No. Other than thanks a lot. No, I feel like very privileged to be on the same panel with Kelly and Laura. So thanks a lot for that. That's great.
No, thank you. Laura, anything that you wanted to add to conclude?
Well, just thank you to everyone for joining us. 65 of you have taken the time to listen to us talking, and I hope that we might have inspired you or made you think about something. And yeah, just thank you for your time, and thank you for having me on the panel.
Thank you. And then just to add to that as well, so everybody who has attended, Kelly has kindly granted access to her Q2 M&A report, so that will be emailed out, and I think we're just getting some it seems to be that we have answered everybody's questions. So that's why we've done a good job on that. So yeah, everybody, you will get a link to the mergers and acquisitions report, and also if there were any questions that you didn't want to ask on this panel, then contact us at the RedTree, and we can filter everything out to the panelists if you do have any questions. So yeah, we'll close it. Thank you so much, everybody, for both attending and speaking. And yeah, we'll have another webinar soon.
Cool.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.